Surviving the Game as a Barbarian, Chapter 741, Reversed Fate, 4/6 Novels, Br. He was standing in front of the city gate. Boom, boom. The gate that served as the only path between the sacred land and District 7. Boom, boom. Thousands of barbarians brandished their weapons and struck the ground in rhythm in front of that very gate. Boom. Somehow, the rhythmic pulsing seemed to inject strength into his body. Now he was beginning to truly realize reality. The battle was about to begin. Ba-dum. Rodmiller checked his equipment once more. Boom. A bow for that decisive shot. A short sword and a long sword for fierce close combat. A round shield that you would use to defend yourself from ranged attacks or, perhaps, to protect someone important. A bag of gunpowder that could be attached to an arrow, a smoke bomb to deny vision, a potion, scrolls. Boom. He even checked all the consumable items he kept in his treasure vault. However, thanks to the meticulous and regular care he always gave them, he found nothing out of order. The deep sigh he let out eased his nervousness a little. Rodmiller did his last stretches. Did I gain weight? The equipment he had worn for the first time in a long time felt tighter. Still, it was only a slight discomfort. Wearing the equipment didn't feel strange or uncomfortable. On the contrary, it felt as if he was finally wearing his clothes. I thought I would never wear this again. But perhaps he had always known this subconsciously. Even when he was in dire need of money, he preserved the equipment, storing each piece carefully. Anything for a day like this. Boom. After observing his surroundings out of habit, Rodmiller's eyes finally fell on the faces around him. Their expressions were hardened, filled with a firm determination. He found this to be very unusual. Well, he wouldn't have thought twice if he had seen adventurers with such expressions. Boom. However, as the barbarians pounded the ground in rhythm, as if they were at some kind of festival, Rodmiller noticed the familiar tremors running through their bodies. It was the tremor of someone who was about to face a battle. Well, I suppose, they were still people. They would bleed if they were hit by a weapon, and if they lost too much blood, they would no longer be able to see the people they cared about. The gate will open soon. Prepare for battle. Einar suddenly shouted from the front line, loud enough to be heard a kilometer away. The warriors who were striking the ground shouted in response, as if they were waiting for his signal. Brace's law. His ears felt like they were going to burst from the screams. However, he had no free hands to cover them. Rodmiller tightened his gear and looked straight ahead. Standing in front of the gate were Versal Gowland's hand-picked elite members. Naturally, they were equipped with excellent armor and weapons, and even the aura they emanated made them seem on another level. Seeing Einar among them made his grip on his weapon tighten. She was guarding the gate, wielding that massive green spear she had obtained during her adventures. She looked more trustworthy than anyone else present. However, upon seeing her, Rodmiller had a thought. Ah, so that's it. This is what an ally of Bjorn Yandel looks like. But there was no reason to torture himself about it, no need to feel ashamed of the truth. When had it ever been any different? He was always slow and always lagging behind. People said he was meticulous, but he wasn't that way because he wanted to be. Accepting his fate, Rodmiller gave up his life in the labyrinth and looked for a new job. Imagining himself in that position was unproductive. Those who were there were chosen because they kept moving forward while he had retreated. Boom. More importantly, he was there for a different reason. Grrrrpp. There was no need to feel inferior to anyone. Ba-dum. He even ignored the warnings of his intuition, which detected danger. The barrier has fallen. Ellipsis. Rodmiller raised his weapon to fight. Brace's law. Just like the barbarians who shouted the name of their ancestral god when facing combat, Rodmiller raised his weapons to protect something important to him. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? That was the only thought occupying Sven Perov's mind at that moment. What do I do? The same question kept echoing in his mind, demanding an answer. Huh, did you hear me? We need to save her. To save or not to save? Surprisingly, Parev's dilemma was not to answer this question. The answer to it was already decided. Bah dumb. He couldn't save her. His intuition screamed that if he came out of the closet to save the woman outside, something terrible would surely happen. No, Parev was contemplating something entirely different. Some might even think he was the worst person in the world. What do I do? He was trying to figure out what he needed to do to convince Lilith Maroni to leave that woman along with him. He thought about it over and over again, but the answer never came. And then, the crucial time passed. We run the risk of our location being discovered. In the end, that was all he could say. Maroni was silent for a moment. Then, with cold eyes and a voice filled with the bitterness of betrayal, he replied. I'm disappointed. I didn't think you were that kind of person. It was as if someone was stabbing needles into his heart. The truth escaped him as a result. You were more important to me than some random stranger, Miss Brown. Even though he felt awkward admitting it, Parev quickly continued. And we need to survive to fulfill the resolution we made that day. Although it sounded like an excuse, the reason still held some truth to him. However, Maroni's reaction remained distant and cold. If we follow our cause while ignoring the lives of others, how are we different from the palace? He was unable to answer. Stay in the closet, Mr. Parev. I will save her alone. Maroni went to the window and concentrated for a moment of silence. No Kartora. The spell conjured with her chant passed through the shattered window and hit the ground below. Eeeeeeeeee. The only scream left was the woman's. Maroni could thank her training as a military mage for her ability to quickly hit 2 targets with a single spell. She turned to face the man cowering in the closet. Parev didn't know what to say at that moment, but Maroni did. Don't worry, she said. I won't cause you any more trouble, Mr. Parev. What do you mean? What are you? Before he could finish his question, Maroni jumped through the broken window and onto the ground. Miss, please return to the building you came from. I will take care of the bodies here. Huh, oh, right. I'll help too. I'll hold this part. So hold your legs, please. As the hurried conversation carried outside, Shame gnawed at Parev. But that didn't change anything. Wham! Parev locked the closet door tightly. The battle began not with a bang, but with a crackle. Vwong! The translucent barrier that once started from the walls and rose up to the sky slowly dissipated until it disappeared. Then came 5 seconds of silence. Those 5 seconds were peculiar. Something he had never experienced. Dumb. Blood rushed to his head, his vision narrowed, and his heart was pounding so hard it felt like he was going to vomit. Why aren't they coming? Did the barrier simply dissolve for another reason? Do I not need to fight? As a new hope emerged. In his chest. Bang! A mana cannon blast destroyed the gate and crushed his hope with it. Fortunately, thanks to the protective barrier the mages had cast over the area, the cannon did nothing more than shatter the gate. Whoosh! They are coming. However, beyond the dust raised, one could hear the sounds of hundreds, perhaps thousands of soldiers running towards them. The rumble of the march grew ever closer. Brace's law. Rotmiller's first experience with war was completely different from what he expected. For example, he had assumed that the elite members on the front lines would block the soldiers from entering. That hardly mattered, considering there were thousands of soldiers. They could block the main flow of a river, but not every tributary that formed. Kill them all. A small group broke through the front line and reached the second line. As if mocking the false peace of that strange silence, blood and screams stained the area near the gate. Absolute chaos, without any strategy or tactics, unfolded. Right before your eyes. Vwong! An arrow passed close to his ear, breaking him out of his daze. Rotmiller began to brandish his weapon with everything he had. Slash! He cut down an enemy with his long sword. Hwang! He fired his bow, piercing another head. Bang! He threw a bag of gunpowder into the middle of his enemies and even jumped and rolled to save an ally at his side. He did everything he could. And that didn't just apply to Rottmiller, but to everyone present. It's Einar Fenelon, so she's worth a second-tier essence if she's killed. Die. Einar personified the expression, a one-woman army, as she swung that massive green spear, dominating everyone around her. Boom. Spirit of blood, Erwin Fornacci of Terja. Even if the others were not as famous as the two women, each clan demonstrated the teamwork they had forged over countless years. The barbarian warriors also continued fighting without showing any signs of retreating. Brace's law. Kill everyone who came to the Holy Land. Maybe, just maybe, they could stop Noark's forces. But it didn't take long for that hope to fade away. Bang! Mana Cannon. It's the Mana Cannon. Noark's forces managed to take the space above the city walls and finished positioning the Mana Cannons. They began firing on the battlefield. Bang! 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 Every time a Mana Cannon fired at the concentrated front line, dozens, sometimes even hundreds, of people would be seriously injured or die. Ring. Has life always been this fragile? Rottmiller felt as if his soul was being chewed up and spat out by the monster that was war. Ha! Ha! Not even 10 minutes had passed since the battle began, and yet his breathing was already short. His hands and legs were shaking from the effort of wielding his weapons. Perhaps his ears had also been damaged by the explosions. At some point, he lost the ability to hear anything other than a high-pitched, piercing sound. He did not hear the screams of the warriors dying around him. He did not hear the screams of the enemies who were advancing with the intention of killing him. There were only two sounds Rottmiller could hear. Ring, that sharp, piercing sound that stole his usual consciousness, and ba-dum, the beating of his heart, which yearned to live. Surrounded by the silent tides of screams and clamors, Rottmiller brandished his weapon. Ba-dum, all while ignoring the inexplicable restlessness in his heart. Surviving the Game as a Barbarian, Chapter 742, Reversed Fate 5/6 Novels, BR. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Time crawled, slower than he had ever felt it before. 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes. The more time passed, the more suffocated he felt. The interior of the closet, which had once provided him with comfort, now seemed to strangle the air in his lungs and take away the easy rhythm of his heart. He was restless and worried. 7 minutes, 8 minutes, 9 minutes. Was she okay? Perhaps she had been discovered by other Noarchians and was in grave danger. Tormenting scenes played out behind her eyelids in the darkness of the closet. Ba-dum. This was also a kind of intuition. But this time, the intuition was not about him, but about someone else. 10 minutes, 11 minutes, 12 minutes. Sven Perev didn't rest. Instead, he pressed his ear against the closet door, straining to catch any sounds outside. The last thing he heard was Lilith Maroni and the woman she had saved by hiding the body and entering the building across the street. After that, he could barely hear anything. They must have found a good hiding place there. Clack, clack, clack. But every time a unit of soldiers passed by on the road, Perev felt shivers run down his spine. The locker was still safe. His intuition told him this repeatedly, the same intuition that had saved his life countless times. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. However, did this also apply to the building across the street? The answer his intuition gave him was no. Even without it, he could objectively deduce that this place was not safe. If it were, that woman would not have been captured by those lackeys and dragged out into the open streets. Then came the incident. Clack, clack, clack. Another group of armored soldiers marched down the road and then stopped. Clack. They stopped in front of the building, he noticed. Damn. He wanted them to just move on, but his instincts were right again. Did they disappear while patrolling this area? A voice asked. Yes, another replied. This was the last location recorded in their report. Ha! Why would they bother coming all the way here to patrol if it was just for fun? Well, they were using the patrol as an excuse to look for something to pawn. They should have found a woman, that's what. Unlike the proper military discipline of the Raftanian army, the conversation was typically Noarchian. This only increased his anxiety. It was obvious what the fate of anyone captured by those two would be. Bah dum. In retrospect, the world had always been like this. Every unfortunate incident was fueled by his worry and anxiety. The more fear and restlessness he felt, the more unfortunate events occurred. Just like now. One of the voices outside suddenly exclaimed. Wait, I'm feeling death energy. Death energy. A lot of time has passed, so the signal is weak, but it's clear. Someone died here. Can you give more details? Wait a moment. There was a long, tense silence before the man finally spoke again. About an hour ago, 3 people died. His voice was much lower than before, but Parav, who had finished strengthening his body with divine power, could hear him clearly. His partner spoke next. That matches the number of people missing and the time too, about an hour ago. That makes it more likely that it was our men. From what I can see, someone moved the bodies and used magic to erase the blood trails. So, not even your dark magic can find out where the culprits went. Said the man Parav suspected to be the commander. And Parav desperately hoped that the dark sorcerer's magic would fail. Black magic is not omnipotent. I understand, but at least I can see where the bodies went. They were moved to that building over there. The culprits could still be here. We need to search the area at least once. Yes, we do. Seeing how cleanly they handled the bodies, they seem to be quite skilled, but even people of that caliber usually don't know much about black magic. If I hadn't detected the death energy, I wouldn't have noticed it either. Just in case, let's make a report before we go in. Hey, Lexton, the supposed commander called another man, who quickly reported something. From what Parav could gather, he was contacting the main forces. Curse. His mind clouded with uncertainty. Should he act now, before they sent the report? Or should he stay put? The best case scenario would be if they searched the house but didn't find Maroni and the woman. Commander, I have finished reporting everything you asked for. However, before he could come to a conclusion, everything was already decided. He missed the moment, and all he could do was watch. Combat formations. Since we don't know how many enemies we're facing, we'll search with the utmost care. The Noarchians carefully entered the building, and minutes and seconds that seemed like an eternity passed. No dump, no dump, no dump. An eternity of uncertainty about whether or not you made the right decision. About 7 minutes later, the outcome was revealed. See Commander. Boom. Ack. Explosions and screams echoed simultaneously, assaulting his ears. Thus, the battle began. As expected of a former military mage, Maroni reacted appropriately even after being discovered. However, in the end, she was defeated. Damn, we lost 7 men just because of that woman. The heavy sound of a punch was followed by the groan of a familiar voice. Wait, she looks familiar. Lilith Maroni. She is a military mage and ally of Bjorn Yandel. What? Ha ha. Ha ha ha. Today is our lucky day. What an achievement. If we capture her alive and bring her back, we will definitely be rewarded for this great contribution. Capture her alive. These words made Parav's hope soar. Nah, what are you talking about? One of the men scoffed. That's old news. It's been a while since the higher-ups said we don't need to keep them alive. Oh, really? But it would be a waste to just kill her here and now, right? Of course. We can't let her die an easy death after killing 7 of us. I lost an arm too. Even that small thread of hope crumbled into nothing. There was another punch. Parav simply closed his eyes and took a deep breath, silently. Bah dum. That intuition that guided him was playing with his heart and telling him clearly, if he covered his ears and ignored it, bah-dum, he would survive. Still, let's extract some information from her. There may be allies hiding around here. Even if Lilith Maroney, who risked her own life to save another person, died. Hey, speak up. Are you alone? Do you have allies? She remained silent. Well, you will tell me when you start to feel pain. He would live. Huh, Commander. There's someone else here. Yeah, that innocent civilian would die. I'll leave her alone, came the familiar voice. Hey, look how her expression changed. But he would live. Wow, huh, there's a baby here too. Please. Don't hurt my son. Please spare my son. But was that right? And no. Parav didn't ask himself again. Open black lens bracket Sven Parav cast Sword of Condemnation. Close black lens bracket. Ha. 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 He forced his panting breaths to calm down and continued running. There were two reasons for this. Breathing regularly would allow him to run further. Chase us not. And he needed to run further to survive. Ha. 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 Brown Rottmiller ran along the familiar forest trails with all his might. He hadn't deserted the battle or anything like that. The mana cannons firing at them had forced the main force to retreat from the walls, and due to the overwhelming difference in numbers, the front line had fallen and a retreat order had been issued. It was a very logical plan. The real plan was to pretend to retreat to expand the battle line as much as possible, allowing the elite unit to attack the enemy from the rear. He knew this information because he had once been an ally of Yandel. The specification of former ally carried more weight than ever. It's one of the ones Yandel keeps around. Catch him. He's worth a third-level essence if we capture him. They were chasing him relentlessly. That was why he was running alone through this dense forest trail. He was with other barbarian warriors at first, but soon realized that his presence only put them in more danger. Ha. 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 And so he ran and kept running. Unlike Yandel's true allies, he didn't have the power to fight dozens of soldiers at once. However, if he kept running, he could at least keep those soldiers busy. It was the most he could do as a retired adventurer and former scout. Ha. 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 He forced his legs, which were begging to stop, to keep moving. Ba-dump. Ba-dump. Ba-dum. He ignored the pounding of his heart that told him he was at his limit. Boom. And he threw the last smoke bomb he had. Pishwu. An arrow whistled through the cloud of smoke and struck his abdomen, knocking him off balance. His body slammed into the muddy ground from the impact. It is impossible to continue running away. After quickly reaching this conclusion, Rottmiller looked for a sturdy tree and climbed it. Whoosh. Soon after, artificial winds dispersed the smoke cloud, and their pursuers quickly entered the area. Damn, where did he go? Did we lose him? I can't see my arrow. I think I hit him. Then he couldn't have gone far. Look for him. The pursuers moved quickly around the tree. Rottmiller made another calculated decision. What did he need to do to ensure his survival? Although he had not climbed to the higher floors of the labyrinth, he had visited it countless times and used his experience to reach the right conclusion. I need to heal my body. It didn't seem like they would give up the search. Sooner or later, he would be found, and if they found him in this state, he would be captured against his will, with no way to resist. He needed to heal his body first, on one condition, considering that his pursuers were still close by. Do it as quietly as possible. Rottmiller pulled out the arrow that had pierced him in the stomach, then bit down on the hilt like a gag before pouring the potion over the wound. SSSS's. It was the same old pain, the pain that made him question whether he was truly being healed. Rottmiller once again felt admiration when he thought of Yandel. He always struggled to endure this pain. How was this possible? Even though he had asked the question himself, he already knew the answer. It was to survive. His jaw clenched reflexively, and the veins in his head throbbed as blood surged, but Rodmiller held back any sound. However, he was unlucky. He made all the right decisions and did everything he could under the circumstances. Damn, you scared me, but it was just bad luck. The man who found him was the only one among the pursuers who was relaxing and urinating on the ground. Swoo. He raised his head without a care and ended up spotting Rodmiller. The moment he noticed him, he fired his crossbow, hitting Rodmiller in the thigh. Thud. He fell to the ground with a thud. When he regained consciousness, his pursuers surrounded him. Wow, this guy's head is worth at least a third-level essence. What are we going to do, Captain? The order to capture them alive was rescinded a while ago. We just need to take his head and identification, then head back. The conversation seemed too informal to be about taking someone's life, and the decision was made immediately. Can I do that? You? Echoed the captain. When would I get another chance to cut off the head of an ally of Bjorn Yandel? Do whatever you want. With that, the sneaky man was allowed to be the executioner. He approached Rodmiller while slowly twirling his dagger. It's going to hurt a little. I'm going to have to saw your neck, since this one is pretty short. Instead of begging uselessly for his life, Rodmiller closed his eyes. He only had a few more seconds to reminisce about the life he had been given, and in those few remaining seconds, many nostalgic faces flashed through his mind. His parents, who died when he was young because they couldn't pay their taxes. The director of the orphanage who took him in and took care of him. His master, who taught him the skills of a scout for free when he was a novice adventurer. They were the faces of people he was grateful for. It was a difficult life, but with many good things to enjoy. If I had to choose one moment among them. Actually, I think that was the best. The sneaky man froze when he heard Rodmiller's murmur. What is this bastard talking about? What was Hikura doing while all this mess was going on? Did he escape safely? Rodmiller hoped so. Even if that great forge was swept away by war, the priority was to survive. I should have visited him more often. Regret welled up in his heart as other allies came to mind. Misha Karlstein, Bjorn Yandel, and Riol Warbdwaki. Would your friend greet you with a smile? Or would he be angry that you arrived so early? It was impossible to know, but Rodmiller couldn't help but smile. Is he smiling? How could he not smile? It was only in his last moments that he truly realized something. Really? He murmured. I had thought about it before. That if and when that moment came, maybe I could understand what that friend felt. It was an absurd thought. What an amazing man he was. But what about him? Brown Rodmiller was too common. He was unable to remain with the people precious to him and had to retire as an adventurer. And in the end, he met an equally common end. What is he saying? Asked the executioner. If you keep talking nonsense, I'll start sawing you now, understand? He wanted to live. I didn't want to die. There were many things I had put off and many things I had not yet done, and many more that I could probably accomplish in the future. Swing. But that was the end. Rodmiller closed his eyes silently, and the face of one last person crossed his mind. It wasn't the savior who changed his life, nor a precious ally, nor someone he had spent a lot of time with. I should have been more honest. Really, why did he have so many regrets? May the blessing of the Twilight Star be with you. Like any other ordinary person facing death, he cried out to his god in his final moments. Boom. Then his eyes suddenly flew open at the explosion. He had no idea how it happened, but luckily. What are you doing with my whisk? It seems he still had stories to tell. Surviving the game as a barbarian. Chapter 743. Reversed Fate, 6/6 Novels, BR. Where should I go? District 7 or the Holy Land? To be honest, it was a difficult decision to make. Because, depending on where you go, the people who die will change. If I went to District 7, X would die, and if I went to the Holy Land, Y would die. Although I didn't know exactly who X or Y would be, I was certain that they would both be equally precious allies to me. That will be the most beneficial decision for you, Lord Lion. But then, that damn elder gave me advice through the wolf. He said that letting X die to save Y would be more beneficial to me, that I needed to go to District 7. And that devious way of talking about a game of fate cards. In the end, I decided to follow my original path, go to the Holy Land. There was no specific reason for my choice. I even agreed with him that reverse fate was still fate in the end. Don't even think I'm going to believe you for a second. But Oral Gavis was not someone I would trust. If I was destined to lose one person no matter what I did, I decided it would be best to continue on the path I chose. Even if I were to regret it in the future, at least it would have been my decision. That old man doesn't know me yet. He should know by now that I'm resistant to such direct advice. Also, or was he aiming for that? I hesitated briefly at the thought, but upon reflection, it seemed unlikely. Even without his advice, I would have gone to the sacred land. There was no reason for him to provoke me into making the same decision. Never mind, it's better to stop thinking about it. Wasting time on this would only cloud my judgment, so I decided to clear my mind and just focus on reaching my destination. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes running. Boom, bang. I heard the distant sound of explosions, which sent a slight tremor through the walls I was running along. What the hell was going on there? I accelerated even more. Eventually, I spotted the part of the wall that met the border of the sacred land and ran towards the gate. Huh, I muttered. It was pure coincidence that I noticed him. I could barely see what was happening below because of the dense canopy of trees. Rodmiller, my first scout, was kneeling in front of a tree, looking exhausted. For a moment, I wondered what was going on, until I noticed a random guy approaching Rodmiller with a sword in his hand. There was no need to think. I jumped off the wall with all my strength. Boom. As if I had used open black lens bracket leap close black lens bracket, the ground shook as I landed. Those surrounding Rodmiller's eyes widened. What are you doing with my whisk? Rodmiller also looked at me as if he had seen a ghost. I knew it in that instant. Yandel, X-era Rodmiller. It didn't take long for the situation to resolve itself. Each swing of my hammer took off one of their heads, and that was the end. Well, except for the fact that they scattered like cockroaches, and more than half fled. Still, the battle was over. Are you okay, Rodmiller? Ah, it seems not. He hadn't fully regained his senses yet, but he came back to reality when I poured a potion over his wounds. SSS's. Ack. Rodmiller recovered all his energy with the potion. Arg. However, because he was full of energy, it took a while for him to calm down and return to normal. Yandel, looks like you just woke up, I observed. Thanks for saving me. How are you? I have more potions. I'm fine. I'm already cured. If he says so. By the way, Yandel, he began. How are you here? Oh, that. I could understand that he was curious, but it would take too long to explain. Let's talk about me later. I want to know what the situation is here now. Rodmiller also seemed to realize that this was not the time to indulge his curiosity. He returned to his old, reliable self and quickly informed me of the situation. The Noarchians broke through the barrier and invaded. Everyone retreated because the difference in numbers was too great, and when their troops scattered, our elite unit took advantage of the opening to attack them from the rear, I summarized. But I have no idea if the plan worked or not. This is not the time to think about that. You need to go there and help. I quickly put Rodmiller over my shoulder. He gasped. He didn't seem to understand why I was carrying him. Why me? Leave me behind. I'll just get in the way. Objectively speaking, Rodmiller was right. Although he was the same, I had changed too much since the days of Team Wounded. He would only hinder rather than help. You are my scout. However, I couldn't bear to leave him behind, and there was no guarantee that he would be safe just because I saved him this time. You'll need to tell me where to go. Rodmiller froze at my playful tone and then smiled. You really haven't changed. Isn't there a saying that a person dies when he changes? I'll live for a long time. It took a moment for him to respond. I don't know what happened to their plan, but we should head to the gate now. With that, I quickly ran towards the gate with Rodmiller over my shoulder. Naturally, the path was full of Noarchians. Not that they got in the way, of course. Boom, boom. Though it was a soldier's duty to block an enemy's advance, the Noarchians quickly moved out of the way when they saw me advancing like a tank. Thanks to their kindness toward the strong, it didn't take long to make it through the forest and reach the gate, now scarred from battle. Many people died. The threshold of the gate was littered with bodies. Many of them were Noarchians, but a significant number were allies, mostly barbarian warriors. Among the bodies, I recognized the faces of warriors I had lived with during my life as a barbarian. The one who bought the first house when the real estate market opened. What I hit on the head when he complained about the quality of the equipment at the coming-of-age ceremony and asked me to give him one. And even the one who asked me to name his son so that he would grow up to be a great warrior. As I watched their faces, I couldn't help but grit my teeth. Still, I continued to scan the area. For some strange reason, the Noarchians avoided my gaze and backed away when I looked at them. They don't matter. Ignore them. There were only two things I cared about. The place where the gate should have been had been completely destroyed. Even the wall around it had collapsed. The pile of rubble was so high that it blocked the only path between the sacred land and District 7. That's it. Huh, isn't that Yandel? What, sir? It's you, sir. To my surprise, I found allies watching me from the top of the walls. The moment I saw them, I began counting. Einar, Versal, Misha, Erwin, James Calla, everyone was there except Amelia, Owen, Parav and Maroni. Sir. Erwin leapt down from the high walls with a light step and ran toward me. Considering her physical prowess, she wouldn't be hurt by a jump from that height, but I instinctively reached out to catch her as she fell. Where were you? Damn it. I was so worried about you, she complained. I'll tell you everything later, but tell me what the current situation is. Even though we were surrounded by Noarchians, I didn't see any problem in opening the conversation right there. Due to my reputation, they just watched us and kept their distance, not showing even a hint of interest in approaching us. From what I heard from Rodmiller, you attacked the Noarchian command line in the rear. Did you succeed? I asked. It was a failure. Although Erwin described it as a failure, I realized the situation wasn't so grim after hearing the details. The group failed to kill the enemy leaders, but they did manage to break down the gate and block the entrance, leaving the pursuing Noarchian elites outside the walls. We control the wall now. We won't let the Noarchians send reinforcements. So that was why they were at the wall. If I hadn't noticed Rodmiller earlier, I would have encountered the group right there. Anyway, Miss Gowland, perhaps. Because I had been away for so long, Erwin was rambling to keep the conversation going, even in the middle of a war. I smiled and interrupted her. It's okay. It's obvious what the next step of the plan is. Also, what do you mean? If we continue to hold the line on the wall, the enemy forces inside the sacred land will never be able to strengthen. In other words, the forces that were already inside the sacred land have been cut off from Noarch's main army. There was only one thing left to do. Isn't it obvious that the only remaining step is to eliminate them? You really are very intelligent. I was used to Erwin's blind praise, so I just let it go and focused on observing the area again. Maybe they had heard that the gate had collapsed, or maybe I had drawn too much attention while running here. In any case, the once empty area in front of the gate was now filled with Noarchians. 1, 2, 3, 4. There were so many that I couldn't even count them. It would take a long time if I wanted to crush each one's head alone. Erwin, get ready. Forgiveness. Let's do that, for the first time in a long time. Akilo. Although I didn't mention what exactly, Erwin understood immediately and started using a skill. Open black lens bracket. Erwin Bakeries of Tertia launched Elementation. Close black lens bracket. I also didn't need to mention the attribute. Open black lens bracket. The spirit of wind now dwells within your body. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. All damage you take will be adjusted for improved dodges. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Damage received from magic is doubled. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You have received a bonus against penetration and slash damage. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your agility stats have increased significantly. Close black lens bracket. Nothing worked better for dealing with hordes of enemies. Open black lens bracket. The range of all your attacks is tripled. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You cast swing. Close black lens bracket. My hammer grew like the Monkey King's staff, extending towards the enemies. Boom. A refreshing sound echoed throughout the battlefield, but it was drowned out by the speed at which my mind worked. Run. How can we fight something like that? X was Rodmiller, and X survived because I came to the Holy Land. Boom. So who was Y? Surviving the game as a barbarian. Chapter 744. Scout 1/7 Novels, Br. Sven Perev walked out of the wardrobe door and towards the window. His mind was boiling with stress, and his thoughts seemed to have taken on a life of their own. It was as if a personality buried deep within him had emerged to control him. Dumb. From the moment he left the wardrobe, his heart was galloping, but his mind sang with unshakable certainty. He jumped out of the window. Vwong. His first attack was aimed at the unprotected dark mage in the rear. It wasn't a logical decision, but an unconscious reaction. He only started thinking again after cutting the mage's neck. Since the most dangerous variable, the dark wizard, was dead, he would have no problems with the rest. This expectation proved true soon after. Who are you? Kill him. The Noarchian soldiers only noticed the attack when the dark mage's head had already rolled across the ground. They all turned to attack Perev. Surprisingly, one of them recognized him. Sven Perev. He's Yandel's ally, so it wasn't that he had gained a reputation on his own, but the fact that whoever hung out with him was famous enough. A natural phenomenon, really. You fucking bitch. So you had allies nearby. Although his identity was revealed immediately, Perev did not hesitate. He simply focused on brandishing his sword. Vwong. Slash. With each blow, arms, legs and even necks were cut off. It was a one-sided fight. Slash. When he regained consciousness after the battle, there were no more Noarchians standing. Perev silently lowered his head to look at his white greatsword. He had acquired it recently, after renouncing his affiliation with the Church of Riedlas and his position as a paladin. That once white sword was now stained dark red. He glanced sideways at the bodies on the ground around him. They were cold, lifeless. Senor Perev. Curiosity grew in Perev's heart. Although he didn't know how strong the dark mage he had killed by surprise was, the Noarchian soldiers were incredibly weak if they could be defeated by someone like him. Why are these people? So why were they so determined to torment those weaker than them? Senor Perev. He came to his senses when he heard Maroni's frightened voice. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. As his mind calmed down after the wave of excessive stimulation, the intuition he had momentarily forgotten reactivated. Ba-dum. That place was dangerous. He could die if he stayed there. Perev quickly raised his head and looked at the window. No. However, he knew instinctively. Even if he went back and hid in that wardrobe, he would no longer be safe. The one place in the city he had considered safe was no longer. Senor Perev. But he had no time to wallow in despair. The enemy had already made a report before discovering Maroni. Another unit would be sent as soon as they realized contact had been cut. So what was the one thing he needed to do at that moment? His intuition, which always guided his decisions, was busy, so it was easier to make a quick decision. We need to get out of here now. He needed to get out of there. As quickly as possible, he ran down a desolate street, carrying a total of 3 people on his back. A witch, a mother and her son. Where are we going? That's the direction of the fire. That's exactly why we're going there. The reason he was heading towards the eastern area of District 7, already half consumed by flames, was simple. The fire was less scary than the people. And since this place was still a source of the expanding fire, there would be fewer soldiers. It was obvious at first glance that the fire was too big to be contained at this point. Hiding nearby was the best choice they could make, and if something went wrong, they could simply jump into the fire and use divine power and magic to withstand the flames. Ba-dum, ba-dum. Even though he knew it was dangerous, he ignored his intuition and continued running. With every step, he felt shockwaves run down his spine, as if he was running through an active earthquake. His spine trembled from the weight of the 3 people he carried on his back. His mother's body was also larger than an ordinary woman's, so he had to use both hands to carry them all. Being discovered by an enemy on the way would be a big problem. I am really sorry. After running for a while, he heard an apology coming from behind him. It was from Lilith Maroni. For what? He asked. For getting angry and saying you weren't who you said you were. Hearing the guilt in her voice, Parav felt as if needles were piercing his heart. You don't need to apologize. You didn't say anything wrong. No, I was wrong. You ended up saving us. So what I said has already been proven false. He supposed that was one way to interpret it. Although it seemed like she was forcing an outcome from an already drawn conclusion, he didn't deny what she said. Discussing it in depth would be pointless at the moment. Besides, it would help ease the regret a little. The regret of having left the wardrobe. So, said the mother, are we going to the east area? Where the fire is? Perhaps the previous situation was so unusual that he only now realized that her voice sounded calm and refined. She also seemed to have a certain tenacity. I couldn't say anything before, due to the situation we were in, but thank you for saving me and my son. Hearing this, Parav felt uncomfortable. I didn't do it for praise. In fact, he was thinking at that moment that in the worst-case scenario, he might have to abandon the mother and child. It was a realistic thought, although he had not yet decided to act on it. However, even as he contemplated it, Parav knew that if that scenario were to happen, abandoning them and running away with only brown Lilith would always be the right choice. Still, thank you. Anyway, that's not what I meant. If we're going to the eastern area, how about we head to the eastern branch of the Reedless Church? It was a completely unexpected idea. The Church of Reedless. Yes, my husband is an adventurer, and as the world has become a very wicked place recently, he has often informed me of where I should go to find shelter, depending on the situation. But judging by the fire, there's a good chance that the eastern branch has already been consumed by flames. No, that's even more reason to go there. From what my husband told me, the eastern branch of District 7 has a divine fire protection spell applied to the entire building. For a moment, he thought that perhaps she was mistaken. Even though he had been a paladin of the Church of Reedless, he had never heard of anything like this. Do you know what level your husband is? He asked first. Third, this greatly increased the reliability of the information. The man was not just anyone, but a third-tier adventurer. He would not have given incorrect information about DRHITPD hideouts to his wife. Furthermore, it might have been different for bishops working in administration, but not all paladins knew about the situation of all branches. Information from an adventurer who was inspecting locations to ensure his wife's safety was more reliable. A building that can withstand fire. If this really existed, it would be the ideal shelter for them. The problem is whether we can get there safely. Is it possible? From what I hear, Mr. Yandel has something that allows him to walk through fire without any problems. Ah, she was talking about the fire orb. He was really famous. If Miss Maroni and I combine our strength, the three of us, no, the four of us, including the child, will be able to get there safely. That is, of course, if they didn't encounter enemies along the way. Parav purposely left this little detail out. By the goddess, I am so lucky to find people like you. Yes, but why were you hiding on that street, ma'am? The evacuation of District 7 must have ended long ago. Why didn't you evacuate with the others? Suddenly, he became curious about his situation, which also seemed quite unfortunate. No, I evacuated. However, since the other districts were all overflowing with refugees, people like us could only stay on the outskirts. We were so close to the battle line that we could hear the sounds of fighting and people dying every day. And, in time, the palace army was heavily repelled, and the Noarchians advanced into our territory. The Noarchians who had flooded in like a tide also retreated, taking with them any civilians they could capture. From what she had heard from other civilians who had been taken, they were to be used as human shields, but she wasn't sure. Before she was taken to the battle line to be used as such, she managed to escape. A huge fireball fell from the sky. The palace's retaliation dealt a considerable blow to the enemy, but the attack didn't seem to care about the civilians being held hostage. She was lucky to survive and used the chaos to escape. There are probably a lot of people hiding in District 7, like me. A few thousand were taken hostage back then. So something like this happened. War really only generated tragedies. After hearing the details of her situation, a question arose in Parav's mind as he continued running. What happened to this woman's husband? He thought about it for a moment, but in the end, he decided to leave the question unanswered. Instead of satisfying his curiosity, he needed to focus more on running. There were truths in this world that could be revealed even without asking for answers. They were in the middle of a war, where it wouldn't be strange for anyone to die. What would have led a third-level adventurer to leave behind his son and wife? Parav didn't ask. However, military mage Lilith Maroni approached the issue differently. Do you know what happened to your husband? She asked the question carefully. However, the woman gave an unexpectedly calm answer. I don't know. When all this started, he was drafted into the army. I sincerely hope he's safe, the mother murmured, with sincere desire. Your husband is surely fine, Maroni comforted her. He's probably running around looking for you as soon as he realized you weren't there anymore. They were heartwarming words, but the woman's reaction was lukewarm at best. Well, I hope he doesn't do anything reckless like that and stays in a safe place. Forgiveness. Maroni tilted her head, surprised by the unexpected answer, and the woman's ears appeared behind her black fur. Well, my husband is terrible with directions. I'm worried he'll end up going somewhere dangerous just to look for me. Surviving the game as a Barbarian. Chapter 745. Scout 2/7 Novels, BR. Unlike the comforting embrace of the closet, the streets were dark and plagued by death. Parav kept running, and then ran even further. Lilith Maroni, the woman whose name he still didn't know, and the child who was still crying and clinging to him. He carried the three people on his back. Parav's restlessness did not diminish with distance. In fact, his mind became increasingly filled with varied thoughts, each one small and insignificant. It was uncomfortable to run because his hands were full. His hips were stiff after being in the closet for so long. He wanted to eat strawberries straight from the fridge. Why didn't the goddess grant her paladins some kind of movement ability? If I had gigantification too, so he could easily carry three people on his back and run much more efficiently. There were several essences with incredible abilities like this. Despite his sudden envy, there wasn't much he could do. Believers who possessed divine power couldn't consume essences, unlike mages. Why is this so, anyway? The church said that their souls belong to the goddess and therefore should not be stained with the marks of other souls. But how did that make sense? Parav stopped suddenly. Everyone, stay quiet, he whispered, quickly hiding between the buildings. In short, they were less than 5 minutes away from the burning eastern area of District 7. It looks like the palace army and the Noarchians are fighting. What if we looked for another alley? We could get around them. If we want to get to the eastern branch you mentioned, going through here will be the quickest way. It would take about 3 times as long to get around the conflict, and there was still the matter of finding a viable path while everything was on fire. Since it seems like neither side has the upper hand, how about we take this opportunity to move forward quickly, suggested Maroni. Parav pondered for a moment, then nodded. All right, this will be a little dangerous, but all things considered, I think it will be the safest route. With that, the discussion ended. Parav let out a deep sigh before rushing out of the alleyway towards the battlefield. His hands were already busy holding the 3 people on his back. I'll leave it to you, he whispered urgently. Now, Maroni was the only one in charge of the defense. Parav couldn't help but feel uncomfortable about putting his safety in someone else's hands, but there was no choice. He even considered closing his eyes and simply running straight ahead, blindly. That would be overkill, right? In the end, however, he kept his eyes open as he advanced through the blood-soaked battlefield. Who are these guys? Are they enemies? At first, neither side took action because they could not determine whether the newcomers were allies or enemies, but this confusion did not last long. Lilith Maroni, Sven Parav, they are Yandal's allies. Kill them. The Noarchians recognized them and immediately began attacking them, while the palace soldiers enthusiastically protected them. Yandal's allies. The palace is definitely up to something. We need to kill them here. The way they're moving forward with such focus, there must be a good reason for that. We need to do our best to protect them. It was a completely unexpected turn of events. He had only planned to use the chaos of the battle to go unnoticed. Do I think the pros and cons balance out? He didn't need to think too much about it. He just needed to focus on moving forward and crossing to the other side. Boom. Awak. Stab. The palace mages deflected the spells thrown at them, and the soldiers defended against the swords aimed at Parav's chest. The attacks that escaped were blocked by the mana barrier that Maroni could barely maintain. It was one critical moment after another. Whoosh. The result was that he crossed the battlefield unharmed and arrived at the eastern area, which was still in flames. Even so, the people trying to kill them and those trying to protect them continued to fight behind him. Well, at least no one would follow them into the flames. Open black lens bracket Sven Parav cast Prayer of Protection. Close black lens bracket. Parav cast the divine spell as planned. After quickly confirming that a thick barrier surrounded the 4 protected by Maroni, he began to run into the fire. Why is he going there? Allies and enemies alike murmured in defeat as they realized he was running into the flames. Whoosh. After entering the fire, he began to run quickly down the street. It was difficult to see because of the flames and smoke, but since he only had to move forward, he didn't have much trouble. But, some time later, Parav finally spotted the eastern branch of the Reedla's church in the distance. The small temple had a familiar statue of the goddess installed at the entrance. It seemed the adventurer's words were true. Although everything around it was burning, the church remained firm in its original form. A translucent barrier shone amidst the dancing flames, blocking the fire from approaching the building. Upon entering the barrier, he went to the large entrance door, which opened without the need for a key. WQ, who are you? To his surprise, there were people inside the temple. A considerable number, in fact. How did you get here? Passing through the flames. I don't think they're Noarchians. Stay behind me for now. As the 4 appeared, the evacuees stood on alert, fear evident in their eyes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There were a total of 37 evacuees there. Of course, it wasn't that strange to see people hiding from fire and war. After all, the 4 of them had also come to seek safety and shelter. No, the real problem was, "Mommy, it's going to be okay. Nothing's going to happen here." Parav felt it instinctively. Dumb. This place wasn't safe either. If you're talking about the boss, I saw him in that forest over there. He's breaking the heads of corpses, saying they might be pretending to be dead. I see. But, isn't this entire area a forest? No, are you really listening to me? That forest over there. Right. Since I'm a bit busy, could you perhaps take the message to Mr. Yandel for me? Tell him that since all the enemies in the Holy Land are dead, he should come here to help. Of course, the warrior, who looked to be in his early 20s, turned and walked back the way he had come. How can you be so simple and innocent with such a rough appearance? Versal Gowland just smiled for a moment as he watched the warrior's figure retreat. Then, he quickly turned his attention back to the battlefield. Although the battle was over, there were many things that needed to be done. First of all, the enemies might launch another attack, so she needed people to stand guard on the walls. The corpses piled up like mountains also needed to be dealt with. At this rate, they would start to rot and spread a terrible smell, in addition to being completely unhygienic. That's a Noarchian. Just throw it aside. It's hard to tell the difference between humans. Then we'll check whether they're Noarchians or not, and you can go gather the barbarians. Oh, good idea. Even without having given detailed orders, the operation gradually evolved into something more efficient. The way the bodies were treated was like day and night. The remains of allies were gathered together with respect, while enemy bodies were simply thrown into a pile. Gowland. No, Vice Captain. What will we do with the Noarchians' bodies? As ordered, we will loot their belongings and throw them in a pile. Versal gave a short answer to Kylan's question. We'll burn them. We won't give them a burial when we don't even know their names. What about the belongings of the warriors and adventurers that we recovered? What will we do with them? Arrange them next to their respective bodies. Once most of them are gathered, we'll apply preservation magic to them. We'll need to send the belongings back to the families of the deceased once they're identified, so make sure no one gets their hands on them. I don't believe anyone would do that, but I will ask you to be more careful. Versal couldn't help but smile slightly as she watched the cleanup work from atop the walls. From her vantage point, she could clearly see the contrast in the treatment of the bodies, which made her realize once again why they had to win this war at any cost. If the Noarchians had won, the situation would have been exactly the opposite. Brace's law. Brace's law. A sudden scream from below snapped her out of her thoughts. It was obvious who had arrived. The strongest warrior in the world. The guardian of the sacred land has arrived. There was only one person these warriors would call upon with such respect and admiration. The boss. It's the boss. Versal left patrolling the walls to James Calla, who had the best view of the group, and dropped down to the ground. Sir, you weren't hurt, right? I was really worried about you. I wasn't hurt, and I was worried about you too. Seriously. Of course. Hee. I don't think it's unnatural, or is it? Erwin was so happy to see him after so long that she simply clung to him. However, compared to her, Yandel seemed somewhat exhausted. Good job. Versal greeted. Oh, good job to you too. I'm sure it was a tough position. It was a small gesture of encouragement, but for some reason, she couldn't respond. The weight of the words, difficult position, hit her hard. Although it wasn't her first time as a vice captain of a clan, the circumstances now were completely different. At that time, there was no war, and the ties between members were not so close. But this man did this work every day. She felt once again how much this barbarian, who initially seemed simple-minded and ignorant, had suffered for so long. "I want to hear everything that has happened so far," he said. "Oh, sure." Versal calmly explained everything that had happened. However, for some reason, she couldn't help but mix her emotions into the report. She complained at times and showed sadness at others. It was like a child telling her father about the problems at school that day. "I understand." After the report, the barbarian thought for a moment before giving an order, as if the conclusion was obvious. "Versal, call all members of all clans. I have something to say." Interestingly, this order brought her more relief than any other had ever brought her. It was unexpected, considering her proactive personality. Who would have thought that simply following orders without carrying any responsibility could be so liberating? "I'll gather them right away." She didn't make any further comments and promptly summoned everyone to Yandel. Only after she finished did she ask the reason for the meeting. "So, what are you going to tell us?" "I'm thinking of going out and fighting them all. I heard they're quite skilled." "Skilled? Well, they'd probably prefer to stay here and remain safe." Versal tried to be as careful with her words as possible, but the barbarian smiled as if nothing worried him. "Oh, that, don't worry about it." He then patted her shoulder lightly to encourage her before standing in front of everyone. "Greetings. I heard you followed my vice captain and stayed in my sacred land while I was away." "Excuse me." "Oh, yes, thank you, Baron Yandel." "Yes, you should be grateful, if you have any conscience." He didn't mention anything about them risking their lives to protect the sacred land, he only spoke of the generosity shown to them as he continued. "The reason I called you here is simple." "What would it be?" "Oh, it's nothing. I'm planning on going out to fight now, and I want you guys to help me." "Us?" The status as a baron, the reputation as the giant. They couldn't say anything, as they were at a disadvantage in these two aspects. However, their gazes clearly screamed, "And why would we do that?" Yandel, however, was perceptive. "So, you prefer to be expelled from the sacred land?" It was a surefire hit, possible only because he was a barbarian who cared nothing for formalities or empty pretensions. "So you're saying that if we don't follow you, you'll expel us from the sacred land? How can you threaten us like that? The evil traitors have declared war on us, and you plan to ensure your safety and yours alone. Is that something an honorable citizen of Raftania should do?" Upon invoking the name of the palace, the adventurers did not dare to challenge it. Everyone was silent. The most surprising thing happened soon after. "Don't worry too much," Yandel reassured. "This is an opportunity for you to achieve great things. And by deeds, you mean." As soon as talk of earnings arose, the adventurers' eyes began to shine. "You may not know why you're stuck here, but the District 5 army has been transferred to District 7 at my request. The army is attacking from the north, and on my way here, I caused a fire, so the eastern area is in chaos as well. What do you think would happen if we attack from the south now? Let's surround the enemy." "Yes, and why do you think their forces left soldiers here and retreated? Do you think it was just because they managed to break down the gate?" "No, they had no choice but to retreat because something more serious forced them to do so." "Ah, so that's what happened. I was curious about this too. But now it all makes sense." After using the stick, at first, Yandel brought out the carrot. The adventurers listened to him as if they were hypnotized. It didn't take long for them to completely surrender to his words. "So, I'm planning on taking everyone who can fight to District 7. Versal's jaw dropped. She couldn't help but be impressed by what she was seeing. Are these the same people as before? While she had been acting as vice captain, these adventurers had done nothing but look for ways to avoid fighting, even when she argued that they needed to protect the sacred land to ensure their own survival. But now, her eyes shone with motivation. Does anyone want to give up? It was as if everyone believed that success was the only possible outcome. Surviving the game as a barbarian, Chapter 746, Scout 3/7 Novels, Br. Parav decided to first gain the trust of the 37 evacuees currently in the Eastern Branch. The task did not present any major challenges. Hello, my name is Sven Parav. Although I am not currently an active practitioner, I was once a paladin of the Church of Reglas and am now an active member of the Anabata clan. After all, he had been a cleric by profession and was now part of a clan that was quite famous among civilians. Anabata. That's Baron Yandel's clan. I don't care about that, but a paladin. By the goddess, we are saved. But how do we know he's telling the truth? Hey, shut up. Don't you see that woman next to him? I don't know her name, but I remember seeing her during the ceremony. She was with Baron Yandel. We're saved. It didn't take long for caution to give way to relief. The consequence, however, was that people began to become chatty once the weight of stress was lifted from their shoulders. Ah, Mr. Paladin, what's going on out there? Did you happen to see a boy about this height on the path? What will happen to us now? The palace sent you to save us, right? Dozens of evacuees bombarded him with countless questions. Parav accepted the new chaotic and directionless atmosphere, trying to answer as many as he could with as much patience as possible. The war is still going on outside. The palace soldiers have entered District 7, so we'll have to wait and see how this plays out. Sorry, I don't think I've seen anyone matching that description. We need to stay here and wait. Unfortunately, the palace didn't send us here to save you. We ended up coming here to escape the battle, just like you. The hope in the evacuees' eyes dimmed at his brutally honest answers. However, Parav considered this better than the alternative. Nothing was more cruel than an unfounded hope. Weren't you sent by the palace? Drugs. I already thought it was strange. How would the palace know we were here? They wouldn't send anyone even if they knew. Didn't you see it before? Those piles of fire fell right where we were. The palace doesn't care whether we live or die. Anger occupied the spaces left by hope. Still, some had a different perspective. To be honest, I'm relieved you have nothing to do with the palace. An ally of Baron Yandel, I will trust you. Yes, it's a relief that you're both here, sir. Paladin and Miss Magician, we were very scared alone. These few people were overly optimistic compared to the enraged evacuees. Parav, of course, wondered why these people, who looked so restless and scared, didn't even bother to lock the front door. Ha, ha, but he swallowed the question with an uncomfortable laugh. Such small things weren't important now. I want to understand the situation here, he announced. Are there any adventurers among you? With his identity revealed, Parav easily took the lead in the conversation, using it to gauge the other's combat strength. However, what he discovered was below his expectations. The evacuees looked away from his question. Interestingly, they all ended up looking in the same direction, as if they were staring at the person who had the answer. Parav followed the gazes and found a middle-aged man, who looked away and let out a dry cough. I only have experience entering the labyrinth a few times. And it's been a long time since I retired. Okay, I get it. A retired adventurer. Someone who seemed reluctant to speak out lest he be forced to do something dangerous. Sir, what do you mean by only a few times? You told us that you were quite famous and powerful in the past. You brat, the man scolded, clearing his throat. Still, how could I compare to Baron Yandel and his allies? May I ask what your level was before you retired? I was on the 7th level. I see. Parav nodded slowly and asked the retired 7th level adventurer to take care of the evacuees. He was probably better suited for that than combat. With that settled, he said, I'm planning to set up camp here, just in case. Can I count on your help? Just tell us what we need to do, Mr. Paladin. Then please gather anything that can be used to block the door. Chairs, tables, cabinets, He helped the other evacuees lock the entrance and even finished creating a rudimentary barricade in front of it. Mr. Parav, Maroni called out. It's good to have a defensive line here, but wouldn't that also block our exit if something were to happen? Couldn't we just leave through the windows in that case? But all the windows are on the second floor. We could leave, but it would be difficult for these people to leave the place with us. There are children and old people here. That, Parav fell silent. She hadn't said anything he could refute, but there wasn't much he could do, even if he agreed. Still, a nagging thought wouldn't leave him alone. If such a situation were to occur, the church would be completely surrounded anyway. Would it be possible to escape with 37 evacuees, all non-combatants? Here he was, a former paladin sheltered in a temple that guarded the statue of the goddess Reglas, but if he were to be caught between a rock and a hard place, his choice was clear: it would be impossible to take them all. I'm not a monster like Bjorn Yandel. I can't do that. There's no point in thinking about escaping right now, Parav said. The risk of the enemy following us here is already low. Besides, we don't need to worry about that risk if we can block the entrance well. I suppose that's true. If we can hold our ground, we'll have no reason to run away. Maroni didn't seem to have a good reason to refute it either. Instead of answering, he began to inscribe a magic circle that would help defend the door. A small sigh escaped as he worked. Shortly after, Parav slowly turned around and started walking without a specific destination. Where are you going? Maroni asked from behind him. I'll take a look at the structure of this building. Okay, I understand. Despite the excuse, there was no need to inspect the building. After all, most temples were built in a similar manner. The worship hall on the first floor and the location of the stairs to the second floor were familiar to him, as were the priests, residences and administrative rooms on the upper floor. After taking a long walk around the entire building, he returned to the worship hall on the first floor. All the chairs had been moved to the barricade, so he just sat on the empty floor. For a reason he couldn't name, he wanted to rest. However, the others apparently misunderstood his intentions. The evacuees who had been coming to talk to him all along walked away, only this time without saying a word. For a moment, he thought it was strange. Opening his eyes and looking in front of him, he saw the statue of the goddess Reglas. Did they think I was praying? This was quite funny. Although he had spent a long time with the title of paladin, he was far from being a devout person. The goddess of the stars. He looked at the statue of the goddess, who was said to rule over adventure and relationships, and asked a silent question. What do you want from me? Naturally, he got no response. Silence was all that followed, a silence created by the evacuees who remained quiet so as not to interrupt his supposed prayer. Peeking through his half-closed eyes, he could see that everyone was facing him, their eyes closed, while some of them repeatedly drew the goddess symbol in the air with their hands. Parav closed his eyes again. Then, muttering softly, like someone wishing on a shooting star, he said, "Please save us, please." He was no different from the other evacuees. A total of 15 clans were present in the sacred land of the barbarians, including the Anabata. Excluding 7th-level adventurers in special positions, the other clans also had members of 6th level or higher. In total, there were 207. There were originally more people, but most of the lower-level adventurers died on the way here. So those who were present were the only survivors, from what I heard. Regardless, adding Einar and the 800 elite barbarian warriors I carefully selected, our military power exceeded 1,000 people. Considering the scale of the event, it probably wasn't that strong of a group, but still. There is nothing to be done. Increasing the numbers would only increase the casualties. Therefore, our group consisted only of the elites who wished to follow me into the great battle and defend the sacred land. Preparations are complete, Versal announced, interrupting my internal calculations. Really, good job. I stood in front of the gate. All the debris had already been removed. Even though I'm kind of tired of it, it's not something I can ignore before we leave. I looked at the 1,000-man army, all waiting for my guidance. Now we will leave for District 7. My voice wasn't as loud as it could have been, but that didn't matter since everyone was listening to what I was saying. As we fight our enemies, some will die and some will survive. My stoic statement was too realistic and discouraging to be something a general would say before a battle. I knew that, but there was no way around it. Some will lose their spouses because of this, and others will lose their parents. When did this change? At some point, I stopped wanting to use sweet words to deceive and give people false hope. That's why you must know this. When you kill your enemies, know for what cause you are killing them. And if you are killed by our enemies, know for what cause you put your lives at risk. Inexplicably, a fervor rose within me as I screamed, I will go to District 7 to protect those I hold dear. Tell me, for what cause are you going to District 7? The answer would be different for each person. Because we can't let the boss fight alone. Some followed me out of respect. Because I want to become a great warrior. Others sought fame and glory. Ha ha, you said this would be an opportunity to achieve feats. Some wanted to satisfy simpler desires. Those damn things need to disappear so our families can rest in peace again. And others went to war to protect those they loved, just like me. So I made my position clear. Even though each of us wants something different, our goals are the same. Therefore, we will walk the same path and fight, trusting our lives to each other. I promised them, I will walk further than all. I will remember why you fought and died today. Follow me. Trust your hope to me. There was nothing more to say. This was a cold and cruel world that did not allow anyone to live without fighting. Brace's law. I was just the person who took the first step. Finally, we entered District 7. We might have been in the middle of a war, but the streets we ran through were all familiar to us. Brace's law. Ra. Grant me your protection. Nia Raftania. With weapons firmly gripped, each of us let out our own battle cry. Ah. As we ran through the deserted streets, we soon spotted a group of people in the distance, apparently Noarchians. There were only about 10 of them. From what I could tell, they seemed to be stationed there to guard the sacred land. Emergency. Emergency. About 1,000 people have left the Holy Land. Bjorn Yandel is advancing from the front. After hurriedly sending some kind of message, they didn't even try to stop us and simply started running away. Well, tried. To escape would be more accurate. There was a saying, if you see the beast, it's already too late. Open black lens bracket Erwin Fornaci of Terja Lanku Ruptura. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket James Calla cast piercing light. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket Versal Gowland cast 4th tier offensive magic. Close black lens bracket. The ranged attackers on my shoulders used their height advantage to target the soldiers trying to flee. Let's call this Barbarian bunker mode. Even Rodmiller was among the attackers within range of the bunker. Oh, he got a headshot with an arrow from that distance. It seemed like he didn't just rely on his skills. Does it look like you've gotten better? I commented. The bow was the easiest to learn within the city limits. True, since training the sword required the presence of another person. But, is it right for me to be here? Rodmiller still looked like he couldn't believe he was part of Barbarian bunker mode. Or maybe he was worried. I'll try my best, but maybe I'm just getting in the way. It's all right, I replied. I've already decided. I was the one who put Rodmiller in that position. There was no choice. He said he would carry his own weight and begged me to let him follow me, so I couldn't refuse. In the end, I couldn't leave him wandering around alone, so I included him in bunker mode. On the one hand, being on the front line could be more dangerous for him. But on the other hand, he would be within my reach. Even if something unexpected happened, I could handle it. Furthermore, Rodmiller was not just decorative. He was genuinely useful. That way, My sixth sense tells me that path is dangerous. Although I had momentarily forgotten, Rodmiller's sixth sense attribute was quite high after consuming the mimic's essence. Thanks to my first scout, Rodmiller, and his navigational skills, I didn't have to think too much to decide my route. Then we'll need to go that way. He stopped, confused. What do you mean? I just said that path is dangerous. That's why I said we should go that way. We're here to fight. The danger is where the enemy will be. Surviving the Game as a Barbarian. Chapter 747. Scout 4/7 Novels, B.R. Parav looked out the second-story window at the burning city. The flames roared like a crackling whirlwind, seeming ready to consume everything around them. However, the firestorm was stopped by something that looked like a transparent glass wall, preventing the flames from touching the building. It was as if they were held back by divine protection. Of course, this level of uncertainty was understandable when viewed from a modern man's perspective. After all, this was a world where fantastical and mystical beings actually existed, a world where its inhabitants would look at such a sight and think of protective magic circles, artifacts, or sacred spells. Well, being a holy spell, I suppose it really is divine protection. Parav shook the thought away. As a former paladin, familiar with divine power, he knew better than anyone the truth behind it. Divine power was just a resource, no different from any other. Of course, the Church declared that divine power was a blessing from the goddess, and that if one lost the qualifications to use it, it would also be taken away. Nonsense. But Parav had seen otherwise countless times. Believers who didn't act like believers, archbishops who didn't act like archbishops, cardinals who didn't act like cardinals, and paladins who didn't act like paladins. People who spoke of righteousness, mercy, and charity, but whose hearts were far from pure. People like him. Sven Parav often thought so. If divine power was not allowed to those who were unqualified, he would have lost it long ago. He was living proof otherwise. After all, he was an evil spirit who had unjustly taken over the body of an innocent person, and on top of that, he had never lived a life befitting that of a paladin. I'm not even a paladin anymore. However, even after leaving the church, he did not lose this power that others called divine. It was proof that divine power was not, in fact, granted only to the worthy, but, ironically, it was also proof that the divine existed. Did you receive a prophecy? Surprisingly, he had already experienced hearing the goddess's voice once. It was in a dream, where the goddess showed him a scene from a dark future that he had managed to avoid. But this only brought more questions. What does she want from me? What do these gods desire? They really existed and seemed to possess supreme authority, as the sacred texts said, so why was this world in such disarray? These thoughts bothered him as he watched the burning city through the window. Some time later, however, though he couldn't quite say why, he noticed that the flames were burning differently. He concentrated as he looked at the burning city. Drugs. The flames were dying down. And he would have a hard time arguing that this was a good omen. In their current situation, the evacuees were not afraid of the fire, but rather of the people from whom the flames were protecting them. Furthermore, the flames were not being extinguished naturally, but were being intentionally extinguished by someone, which only increased their uneasiness. Ba-dum. It was as if something had jumped towards him. Parav forced himself to ignore the hunch and quickly began to do what was necessary. Everyone, come to the back. First, he gathered the evacuees in one place. Mr. Brown. She then asked Maroni to activate the magic circle she had prepared before returning to the second floor to keep watch. The flames were dying down fast enough for him to see with the naked eye. As the flames died down, he saw an army emerging from the fire. A platoon of soldiers, all wearing full armor, marched in rhythm as they put out the flames. Parav desperately hoped that they were palace soldiers, but that hope was quickly crushed. There were over 100 soldiers marching quickly towards him. He leaned against the wall so as not to be seen from outside and watched carefully. Finally, the soldiers arrived in front of the building. Parav crouched down, leaning against the wall below the window, and focused only on the sounds. Please, 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 just walk right past. Despite his desperate hope, there was no way it would come true. And why should he? If he were a Noarchian soldier, he would find it odd that this particular building wasn't burning while the rest of the city was in flames. He would at least take a look. Just like they did, he heard the sound of someone trying to open the door on the first floor. "Commander, it seems to be locked," came a man's hoarse voice. That was the last sound he heard. Parav crawled across the floor, peering up the stairs. There he saw the evacuees gathered in the worship hall, covering their mouths so that no sound would escape. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the door. Very discreetly, one of the evacuees let out a muffled scream. As quiet as they were, it seemed like the soldiers outside were paying close attention to the noises coming from the other side of the door. "Oh, it looks like there's someone in there. Don't let your guard down. It could be one of Yandel's allies." Parav's heart sank. Yandel's allies? Are they here because of us? If that's the case, then break down the door. Boom, boom, boom. The Noarchians began hammering on the door with more energy. Fear began to take hold of the evacuees' eyes. "Commander, it's not breaking. I don't think it's because of the material. There's probably something magical about it." Well, the temple didn't burn down, even though everything around it was on fire. The second floor. Use the windows on the second floor to get in. They were determined to enter the building. There was no point in keeping their voices low and remaining silent. "What will we do? Miss Maroney, I'll leave the first floor to you. I'll take care of the second." Parav stood up from where he was crouched. "Oh, there's someone here," and thrust his sword straight into the face of the man peering through the window. "Sven Parav. Sven Parav is on the second floor. Get him." Upon revealing their presence, the Noarchians were overcome with greed. "His head is mine." If this were an ordinary battle in the Middle Ages, they would need stairs to reach the second floor. But this was the world of Rafdania, where mystical powers existed. Like ninjas, the Noarchians broke through the windows and stormed the second floor. They glared at Parav and swung their weapons with clear killing intent. Die. A battle of one against dozens of people broke out on the second floor. There was no strategy. He swung his long white sword to cut or pierce enemies. Whenever he was attacked, he would block with the shield in his other hand or move so that his vital points would not be hit if he could not dodge. He quickly used holy spells to heal his injuries, but he couldn't gain an advantage while fighting. Why did the stairs have to be in the middle? Parav struggled as he guarded the stairs leading to the first floor. However, as the number of enemies increased, he could no longer resist. He was not Bjorn Yandel. A club hit his head hard, using a skill. The world began to spin around him. Parav was in the middle of healing himself with a holy spell when he took a step back and lost his balance. As he retreated one more step on the ladder, the battle became even more difficult. There was a big difference between fighting on stable and unstable ground. Stab. A thrown dagger embedded itself between his collarbone and tore through the muscle. Tap. He took another step back. Boom. Was it a magic spell this time? He raised his shield to avoid a direct hit, but the impact knocked him back another step. Moving forward was incredibly difficult, but retreating seemed too easy. How can I block so many by myself? His determination began to waver, and as proof of this, he took another step back. When he realized it, he was already halfway up the stairs, and when he turned his head to the side he could see the evacuees. They had closed their eyes and were praying that he could defeat the invaders. But reality was very different from fiction. Instead of awakening a new power at the sight of their despair, he took another step back, this time to dodge an attack. One more step. As he continued to be pushed back by the wave of enemies, Maroney, who was in charge of the first floor, came to his aid. Open black lens bracket Lilith Maroni cast the 5th tier defensive magic, Iron Wall, close black lens bracket. A huge wall appeared between Parav and his enemies, temporarily blocking the stairs. Thanks to this, he was able to catch his breath. Boom. It won't last long, warned Maroni. Even without her saying it, Parav could hear from the explosions that the barrier would not hold for long. There are more of them than we expected. What do we do? Parav did not respond. What to do? He didn't know either. How could they survive that situation? Ba-dum. His heart kept pounding, screaming that there was no way out. However, even when the sky falls, there is always a ray of hope. After quickly looking around, Parav noticed the goddess statue again. What is that? Parav couldn't take his eyes off the statue. For some reason, he began to feel that she held a way to survive. It was difficult to describe in concrete terms, but it seemed like the statue had something to offer. Run. While the magical barrier was maintained, Parav ran to the statue. After examining the entire area around the statue, he saw a small opening in an inconspicuous place. He pressed the spot, and the statue slid smoothly backwards. Is it a secret path? Of course, there was no guarantee that it was a safe path. However, it was the only option to survive. He turned to warn the evacuees. Ba-dum. Suddenly, his heart gave a loud thud, silencing the words before they could come out. That damn intuition was whispering to him. Don't tell them, so as not to tell others. If you want to live. Because this would be the only way for him to survive. There was no evidence or logic to support that. He couldn't hold it in any longer. Fuck. Then what the hell do you want me to do? Intuition seemed to play with him. Was it fun for her to mess with his heart? Instead of feeling relief at having found a way out, the emotions he hated most came first. Then something touched his right hand, which was lying at his side. Looking down, he saw a small child looking up at him, about to cry. Sir Paladin, are you injured? Parav did not answer. He did not ask any further questions either. He just opened the path behind the goddess statue. After fully revealing the passage for everyone to see, he shouted, "Everyone, get down this way." As he screamed, he thought to himself, now it's over. No matter how much I analyzed the situation, I didn't think I would be remembered as a great person. If I were to do something right, I would have liked to have done it in a more impressive way. Well, I think this suits me better. The evacuees descended the stairs beneath the statue. No one thanked him or showed any gratitude, except for the child who asked if he was hurt. It was as if everyone had been expecting him to do this for them all along. He felt no disappointment or betrayal. Yes, everyone is equal. They put themselves first in everything. But of course, not everyone was like that. If they were, why wouldn't he himself have acted selfishly? Why did he act for these people he met that very day? It wasn't like he was a truly noble paladin. Senior Parav, why did he do that? It wasn't like anyone was going to reward me for it. Why are you standing there? Come on. The wall will fall soon. Parav looked at the statue of the goddess. The goddess of the stars, the one who supposedly ruled over adventure and relationships, and always showed the path of destiny. But, as always, she told him nothing. Unlike his intuition, which always showed him the way without asking permission. Ba-dum. Now that I thought about it, what was this intuition, anyway? He had never questioned it before, assuming that he was usually pretty lucky and that his intuition was right most of the time. And yet, honestly, it didn't even make sense. It shouldn't be at this level. Ba-dum. Although he didn't know why or how, his intuition was a blessing. Thanks to this intuition, he was able to avoid many dangers. However, for some reason, a sudden thought caught him in the grip of doubt. Ba-dum. Was this intuition always right? Ba-dum. Had I already lost something important by following her? Ba-dum. And if I didn't have that intuition? Bah dumb. If he didn't have this intuition, wouldn't he have become the man who cowers and trembles in fear inside the wardrobe? Would he have become a much nobler person? Bah dumb. Maybe this ability was a prison. Something that kept him from following the right path. Boom. At that moment, the barrier on the stairs was finally broken, and Maroni shouted from the passage below the statue. Senior Parav. At the same time, his intuition told him. Bah dumb. That there is still time. That should come down right now. Bah dumb. He should abandon those people and save himself. It was a powerful feeling, more secure than anything he had ever felt. However, that was why he was able to make his decision with more confidence than ever before. I'm sorry. Parav pushed Maroni out of the way and returned the goddess statue to its original form. Rightwards arrow loop va, leftwards arrow loop. The beating of his heart had turned into a feeling, and that feeling had taken shape and become a sound. His intuition had turned into auditory hallucinations and began to speak to him. Rightwards arrow loop, follow them quickly. Save yourself. Leftwards arrow loop. That was the reason he didn't follow Maroni down that path. If he did, he knew he would give in to that temptation again. Rightwards arrow loop, Deska logo. Leftwards arrow loop. He patted his own chest, silencing his racing heart, and said, Shut up. Bah dumb. I decide where I go. He raised his sword and shield, then rushed towards the enemies flooding the stairs. Bah dumb. His heart was beating. Bah dumb. More excited than ever. Rightwards arrow loop tisk. Leftwards arrow loop. Open black lens bracket. The ancient evil god licks his lips in disappointment. Close black lens bracket. Surviving the game as a barbarian. Chapter 748. Scout 5/7 novels, B.R. Rodmiller's navigational skills were excellent. The sixth sense was generally not as sensitive to good fortune as it was to misfortune, and by running in the direction Rodmiller said was dangerous, enemies soon appeared. About 70 of them. Their numbers were overwhelmingly smaller than ours. Red Axe Jack. He's a vicious criminal who is said to have joined Orkuls 10 years ago, so you need to be careful. And there was no one I needed to be especially careful of. Open black lens bracket Erwin Fornaci of Terja Lanku Ruptura. Close black lens bracket. Boom. Considering how Rodmiller tried to warn me, the guy was probably some infamous criminal or something. In any case, his head was blown off by a single arrow from Erwin. Did I do well? She asked. Yes, very good. How did you defeat him so easily? Rodmiller muttered in disbelief. Well, his reaction was understandable. The battle that forced Rodmiller into retirement was against the Dragonslayer. We fought at the risk of our lives and barely survived, making sacrifices. But that was years ago. There was no longer any reason to fear Orkuls as an organization, especially considering that the Corpse Collector and Dragon Slayer were high-ranking members. This Red Axe was someone I had never heard of. He didn't need to be taken into consideration. I only heard stories. You really have gotten stronger. Well, I had been struggling to survive every moment of my life up until that point, always shouting the name of the ancient god. Wow. As I advanced like a tank, the enemy forces couldn't even muster a proper response after losing their commander. Jack. Mr. Jack is dead. Run away. I advanced, crushing the heads of anyone in my path, while the enemies tried to run away like headless chickens. Even if we chased them, it would be very difficult to capture and kill them all. No, so I decided to capture some of those who were escaping, those who seemed to have some position of importance, and interrogate them. What were you guys doing here? Especially with such a small group. Gee, that's. Then you won't talk. Crunch. To give an example, I crushed one's head while looking at the next, and the information started flowing before I even needed to ask again. We are a patrol unit. A patrol unit, yes. We moved around the battlefield in small groups to gather information and report it to our superiors. That was our mission. In other words, They were human radars, spread out across the battlefield to check for an enemy or new variable emerging and then report their findings back to headquarters. Ah, so you guys know what's happening on the battlefield right now, right? Yes, of course. The guy answering my questions was as confident as he was knowledgeable and helped me understand the war situation. The Palace Army in District 5 had entered District 7, and the main force of the Noarchians in District 7 was in direct confrontation with them. Of course, this information wasn't exactly surprising. After all, I had requested military support myself that morning. The most important detail came next. Is the captain still in District 7? Yes. I don't know what he's doing, since I'm just a soldier, but I'm sure he's still in District 7. And have you heard any news about Arua Raven? You mean the Golden Mage? Yes. I'm sorry, but I don't know much about her. Tisk. No luck. Where exactly had Raven and Astarota disappeared to? I also interrogated the others we captured, but they all gave similar answers. With that, the questioning session ended. Now, I just needed to quickly deal with them and move on. At that moment, my subject suddenly asked, if it's not too much to ask, could you let me live? Wow, I was wondering what he was going to say. While I couldn't help but admire his negotiating skills, I also couldn't help but laugh. If you let me go, I'll hide in the sewers until this is all over. Seriously. Please trust me. It was the first time he had met someone like this. Although many people had begged for their lives in the past, none had done so as politely as he did. No, however, some things were simply not allowed. Even though he was clearly afraid, the man gave a nervous laugh when I drew the line firmly. Ah ha ha. I guess there's no way around it, right? Please just give me a quick death. Well, since he answered all my questions, I guess I could at least do that for. No, wait, something's wrong. I put down my hammer. More than instinct, it was accumulated experience. My experience of being betrayed countless times throughout my life told me something. Even though I didn't know what, I knew something was wrong there. Versal, I called. Use your verification magic. At his level, there's a good chance it won't work. Just try anyway. Versal cast her spell. As I thought, it doesn't work. Although the verification magic didn't work, there was no reason for disappointment. I had already expected this. I tapped my thigh lightly with my finger. You're a funny guy. I watched his expression and saw his reaction when he heard about the verification magic and when the spell was cast. What do you mean? Me? I didn't lie to you, I swear. Well, according to him. I'll find out soon enough, I said, pulling misplaced trust out of my subspace. I only had one use left, so it would be a bit of a waste. But the situation seemed too dire not to use it. Yes, I can get another one later, better to use it now than to save it. Decision made, I started activating misplaced trust. Ha. Suddenly, he doubled over, with popping sounds down his spine. It was as if all the previous behavior had been an act. What are you doing? I asked cautiously. Bjorn Yandel. Answer me. He stared straight at me with a venomous gaze before cursing, this place will be your grave. Then it collapsed forward, all at once. Frightened by the scene, Misha ran to check his pulse. Bjorn. He's dead. Arg. Why did he have to do that? Making me so suspicious. A bright light illuminated the stone chamber, highlighting every detail in a stunning sight. Beneath that light, a mountain made of corpses rose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Counting them was a futile effort. The corpses, easily numbering in the thousands, had something in common. They were all crushed, like dried vegetables. Suddenly, dozens of additional bodies fell from the ceiling as an opening revealed itself above. As soon as the flow ceased, the ceiling closed again, plunging the chamber into yet another moment of absolute silence. The man standing at the entrance was used to this scene. Although he frowned as if he was in pain, he continued to stare at the sight in front of him with iron-like conviction. Ah, there you are. The gun has been loaded once more, Marquis Tersarion. I see. Let's go back upstairs. The Marquis left the underground chamber and returned to the surface, where an open area surrounded by tall barriers awaited him. Several tubes connected to a huge magic gun. Official name, Thunder. One of the 3 ancient magic weapons in the palace's possession. Well, to be exact, just a part of Thunder, but it didn't matter. Isn't it an incredible instrument? Just grind up a few useless humans, and it generates enough firepower to destroy an entire palace. Silently, the Marquis turned his head to look at the man standing beside him. It's all thanks to you, Lord Marquis. If the palace still had thunder, we wouldn't have even been able to start the war. Although he was an old man, his build was robust, and his eyes shone with more passion than those of any young man. He was the Castellan of Noark. It may seem strange to ask this now, but what led you to oppose the palace, Lord Marquis? The Marquis did not respond. Come on, speak freely. After all, we're in the same boat now. You contact me out of the blue, saying that you'll extract thunder for us and that you'll stand by us when the war starts. However, the fact that you don't want the throne makes us worried, makes us question your true intentions. Hatred, forgiveness. Let's say it's hate. With that brief reply, the Castellan looked confused for a moment, but soon forced a smile. Ah ha ha, so, the king of the New World did something to justly anger our Marquis. The Marquis gave a bitter smile in response, and silence fell upon them. The Castellan seemed uncomfortable with the silence, opening his mouth again to ask a new question. But why are we only carrying thunder? You have authority over her, and I believe you have a plan in mind, so I never questioned it, but we could already have half of Raftinia under our control if we used her. The Marquis let out a deep sigh. I'm waiting for the right moment. A more important moment to use it. Anything more important than conquering half of Raftinia. Exactly. The Castellan seemed bored of being next to the Marquis. And, after more trivial conversation, he left, saying he had other commitments. Some time later, a man with the appearance of a knight entered the building and bowed. The Marquis was direct. Did you find him? The man nodded in response to the calm question. Yes, Marquis. Bjorn Yandel's location has been discovered. The time has come. There are always signs. For example, if your hair suddenly stands on end, it's because lightning is about to strike. If rats, insects, and birds flee an area, an earthquake is likely on the way. So what did this sign mean? What is their status? They're still just following us and watching us. After the subject I interrogated killed himself in a burst of maniacal laughter, another group of soldiers began to pursue us, in an ingenious and malicious pursuit. What about capturing them? Wouldn't that be quite difficult? They're far enough away that not even Miss Irwin's arrows could reach them. Of course, they hadn't caused us any harm yet. They were just keeping their distance while following us. The problem was, it only made me more restless. Badass. The way that wretch died saying something so sinister and the way the soldiers were now following us. It was as if they were omens of a greater disaster. Let's increase the pace as much as we can. We increased our movement speed, but for some reason we didn't encounter any more enemies. Root Miller. I don't know where we should go either. But I feel like something bad is about to happen. Even the navigation I trusted stopped working for some reason. The real final blow, however, was this. Bjorn. They suddenly stopped following us. Our pursuers have disappeared. They didn't stop the chase. They just increased the distance between us. They were chasing us the whole time. Why did they suddenly move away? What could this mean? I remembered a saying. If you see the water receding quickly from the shore, you should run away from the Pishwang. At the same moment, the sound of something like a jet echoed, and everyone ducked in shock. Well, except me. What is that? As the protector in charge of everyone's safety, I raised my head and looked around to check the surroundings. I doubted my own eyes for a moment. I heard that District 4 had been taken over by the Noarchians, and I saw what appeared to be a huge projectile heading our way from that direction. Thunder. It's thunder. Unlike me, who was underground when thunder was used earlier, my allies instantly recognized what it was. As soon as I heard this, I couldn't help but curse. Damn. Using missiles was cheating. Surviving the game as a barbarian. Chapter 749. Scout 6/7 Novels, BR. I remember seeing some war-related news clips in the past. It was from a country going through a civil war, and the video it was coming from showed a missile attack. The clip shared for the segment was quite short. There were buildings that looked like they were built solidly, and the day was bright. There were clothes drying on the balcony of the building, to show the peaceful atmosphere. And then, just 1 second was enough. A missile arrived at an impressive speed from afar and blew up the building. Exactly 1 second was enough for destruction. Watching that short clip left me feeling helpless. It didn't matter if someone was an excellent athlete, a politician with multiple bodyguards, or a soldier who had spent decades on the battlefield. There was nothing anyone could do about it. What could they really do when the attack came so quickly, hitting the building? Deflect. Block. The people in that video probably didn't even realize the missile had hit, even when it exploded. Okay, they could have gotten a missile warning earlier. But that wasn't what mattered at the moment. You sons of bitches. Currently, a missile was flying towards us at an unbelievable speed, as if it ignored the very laws of physics. I stood there, open-mouthed, staring in disbelief at what was happening. Concentrate. However, I didn't feel as helpless as I did when I saw that video. This was a world full of adventurers who easily surpassed the physical strength of those excellent athletes. Well, that also meant that thunder wouldn't be easy to deal with. Stay close to me. I gathered all the allies around me. Since there were over 1,000 people there, it would be impossible to cover everyone, but for some reason, I had a feeling. Fuong. I sighed. That missile was aiming right at me. There were 2 decisions I could make. One of them was to chain together open black lens bracket transcendence close black lens bracket and open black lens bracket gigantification close black lens bracket to make myself as large as possible. Under the effects of open black lens bracket union close black lens bracket, the Aegis wall would also grow in size relative to my body. If I could use defense with it, I could block the missile without any problems. But that wouldn't work. I quickly changed my plan when I saw thunder approaching us in real time. It's not even a nuclear bomb. So why the hell is it so big? Even if I used open black lens bracket gigantification close black lens bracket twice in a row, it wouldn't be big enough to block this. There was only one thing I could do. Open black lens bracket you have cast transcendence. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket the next skill you use will be strengthened. Close black lens bracket. First, I used open black lens bracket transcendence close black lens bracket, then I used its effect on the next skill. Open black lens bracket you have cast Iron Fortress. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket by the authority of the transcendental body. The inherent potential of this ability is now unlocked. Close black lens bracket. Normally, the only effect of this active skill was to amplify the effect of open black lens bracket evolutionary shell close black lens bracket by 1.5 times. I had probably never used transcendence on this skill in a real fight before, well, aside from a few enemies that couldn't even be considered a threat to me, just out of pure curiosity. The skill had a critical weakness, which was that once activated, it was impossible to deactivate it until all of my soul power was exhausted. Open black lens bracket evolutionary carapace has been temporarily changed to transformation carapace. Close black lens bracket. And the outcome also depended on luck. Open black lens bracket physical resistance above 750 close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket 3 special effects are applied to the character. Close black lens bracket. As soon as the skill was activated, a whirlpool formed around my body. Open black lens bracket blessing of storms. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket all damage taken is increased by 70%, but receives complete immunity to the wind attribute. Close black lens bracket. The first one was a failure. There was no way thunder could be a wind attribute attack. In fact, it only increased the damage I took by an absurd amount, making it one of the worst results I could have received. The skin over the dead skin of my joints rippled, becoming sharper. Open black lens bracket fighter's blood. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket when dealing damage with your fists, the damage is increased by times 15 close black lens bracket. Now that, I had fond memories. It was quite fun to put down my hammer and shield and just beat the monsters with my bare hands, and the allies watching closely also enjoyed the experience. Oh, this is going to kill me. But what can this effect do in this situation? Still, it was 1,000 times better than the first negative effect. Now, the last effect. Yandel. Rodmiller hesitated. There's a horn on your head. I cursed internally. There was no need to confirm further what the effect was. Open black lens bracket demonic predator. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket when defeating dark attribute monsters, temporarily absorb their skills. Close black lens bracket. Okay, the last one was a failure too. I wasn't even in the maze. What could I do with this in the city? It was exactly the reason why I had never used open black lens bracket transforming shell close black lens bracket until now. Every skill it gave was quite strong. So if I picked the right one for the occasion, it could be incredibly strong, but I couldn't guarantee the effects. I'm finished. It was beyond feeling defeated. My mind blanked out in panic. The second and third effects were more or less okay, but the first one was definitely a problem. All damage taken is increased by 70%. I had imagined that even when thunder fell, perhaps I could survive, but that hope was gone now. However, it was the only choice available to me. Only open black lens bracket transforming carapace close black lens bracket could have saved all the people around me. That said, it was a risk I would never normally have taken. Those damn palm readers. The record that said that 3 of my allies would die. If I wanted to interpret this optimistically, it could also mean that no more than 3 of my allies would die. I wanted to believe that a twist of good fortune could come, as fate would have it, because considering the power of that attack that destroyed an entire palace, there was no way that only 3 people would die here. But what could I do now? If I couldn't run away from it, I could only face it. After checking thunder flying towards us one last time, I raised my shield to the sky as if I was opening an umbrella. Under it, my allies, including Rodmiller, grouped closely together, and some allies who were further back didn't even make it in time. Please. With one last prayer, I tensed every muscle in my body, bracing myself for the coming impact. Also, at that moment, a bright light began to shine around me from the armor I was wearing. At first, I wondered if someone else nearby had cast a spell or used a skill on me, but it didn't take long to realize that neither was the case. Dragon Aegis Breastplate. The passive skill, the constitutively active skill that I couldn't understand even after getting stuck into it. Open black lens bracket. The noble guardian judged that the bearer's life was in danger. Close black lens bracket. I didn't know what the activation condition was. Open black lens bracket for 10 seconds. All of the wearer's resistance attributes are increased by times 10 close black lens bracket. I also didn't know what its effect was. Whoosh. Huge black wings appeared on my back and spread widely to each side. It was one of the effects that the open black lens bracket transforming carapace close black lens bracket could produce. Open black lens bracket. Your physical resistance is above 1500 close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A special effect is applied. Close black lens bracket. That's what I wanted. The Hanged Man. The effect was simple. Open black lens bracket soul power consumption is increased by times 25 close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket you share all damage received. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket your health cannot fall below 1% close black lens bracket. With this special effect, I wouldn't die no matter how much damage I took. An active skill that I could only use once was unlocked for me. Naturally, I cast it immediately. Declaration of Dominion. As I said the command word in my mind, a black wave spread around me as if a stone was thrown into a lake. Whoosh! The area the wave hit lost its color, and the world turned black and white. All damage taken by any creature within sight range will be absorbed by the character. Close black lens bracket. I felt a little more relaxed and tightened my grip on the hand holding the shield. And then, thunder fell. I couldn't see in front of me. The world was just bright and soundless. A white and sterile universe. I didn't exist in that world. There was no pain, no anguish, no sadness in that world. Since time could not be felt there, time did not exist either. The white universe slowly disappeared, its pure white screen stained by darkness. I began to hear faint sounds. Someone was screaming, although I couldn't understand what they were saying due to the weak intensity of the sound. The emotion in the voice was clear. I blinked, though I couldn't tell if I actually did or not. I felt something touch me. Someone was rocking me. My body felt like it was being moved somewhere. Damage is piling up. Close black lens bracket. Damage is piling up. Close black lens bracket. It didn't feel like pain. It just felt like my heart was exploding, my lungs were tearing, my bones were breaking, and my muscles were twisting. Why was there no pain? It was like having a tooth pulled at the dentist. Even though I didn't feel the pain of the tooth being pulled, the absence had a strange texture. Damage is piling up. Close black lens bracket. Damage is piling up. Close black lens bracket. Of course, my body wasn't completely destroyed. Open black lens bracket your body is being rapidly regenerated by the effects of recovery. Highest level. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket your body is being rapidly regenerated by the effects of recovery. Highest level. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket your body is being rapidly regenerated by the effects of recovery. Close black lens bracket. Even as the internal and external parts of my body were being destroyed, I could feel them being rapidly regenerated. Broken bones were mended. Flesh formed over the exploded heart. Lost blood was quickly regenerated. Damage is piling up. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket your body is being rapidly regenerated by the effects of recovery. Highest level. Close black lens bracket. It was like I was jumping from a hot tub to an ice-cold one 1,000 times a second. Still, as time passed, I began to regain consciousness. Who I was, what I did and what I was going through. Things that I could only comprehend with intense focus were easily coming back to me, as was information about the outside world. This way, I heard someone screaming, but whose voice was that? I couldn't identify it. I could hear the sound of explosions. My body felt like it was floating in the air and then rolling on the ground. However, I only felt these things. As if I was under anesthesia, I couldn't control my own body. Drugs. The wounds aren't healing. Potion. Use more potions. They don't have to be the highest level ones. Anyone. Everyone was trying really hard. Well, not exactly, compared to what I did to get this way. Amelia. How would she react when she found out about this later? I guess she won't praise me for this. I shouldn't tell her. Yes, that would be the best option. She wouldn't believe me even if I told her that she had a good chance of surviving and that this was the only way to save them. Yandel, can you hear me? What? Why am I moving? I didn't know how much time had passed. Only one person was standing when I opened my eyes. What a relief. Rodmiller, the dark-haired one. The scout of Team Lasado, my first group. and a former ally with whom I spent precious moments. How are you? Can you get up? We need to get out of here fast. He looked worried as he spoke to me, and I slowly stood up. Although I didn't know what was going on, the situation seemed quite critical. On the other hand, my body had recovered a bit and I didn't seem to have any difficulty moving. Don't worry, I won't have any trouble moving. Open black lens bracket transforming shell has been cancelled. Close black lens bracket. The changes that had temporarily transformed my body all disappeared. The whirlwind, the horns on my head, the sharp joint bones, the black wings on my back. Well, I didn't care about the external changes. There was exactly one problem that really mattered. Open black lens bracket accumulated damage is received. Close black lens bracket. The debt I was avoiding was paid off in one go. Ah, yes, I was dead. Pishwu. I felt something flowing from every pore of my body, and I fell straight to the ground. Surviving the game as a barbarian. Chapter 750. Scout 7/7 Novels, Br. He brandished his longsword. He blocked it with his shield. He rolled on the ground whenever a blade flew towards him to hurt him. Ack! And when a lethal blade pierced his skin, he let out a scream he couldn't contain. This story would not be heard by future generations, Parav thought to himself. Because the protagonists of these stories were all heroic and strong individuals. Not weaklings like him, and most importantly, Bahaha. Hey, Paladin, I think you're at death's door. So why did you stay here alone? They were the winners. They would return alive to share their side of the story. That's right, that's right. Now go to sleep. No one would share their story. Ack, that was why he could be as despicable as he wanted. He spat the bloody spit into the enemy's eyes, staggered on his exhausted legs, and threw the pieces of used furniture towards the barricade. Ah, wings. Huh, oh, he used childish feints to stab yet another enemy in the neck. You cowardly bastard, you're the ones who are attacking me as a group, he snorted. Interestingly, the trick worked very well. Was it because it was so unexpected? Well, either way, it stopped working after the second time. Unexpectedly, however, being alone had many advantages, including one benefit that he found supreme above all others. Ba-dum. Ha! I really don't want to die like this. Fear could squeeze his heart as tightly as it wanted. Even if he didn't have an ounce of courage left in him, he could openly talk about this fear without needing to care about what others would think. Who would care if that didn't sound like something a hero in a story would say? He wasn't a hero to begin with. Just die already. He was afraid of dying, more than anyone else. But what can I do about it? He thought. It would be a shame if I died alone. Is he talking to himself? Then I'll take you with me. And more than that, he was a strategist who hated the idea of being the one to die. Ack, it was funny in a way. Instead of fighting with the determination to protect others, why did he feel more energized to fight because he didn't want to die alone? He didn't know, and he didn't care. I will be your guide to the afterlife, you wretches. He just swung his sword. Open black lens bracket Sven Parav has cast Twilight Compass. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket in exchange for taking more damage from behind. All damage dealt will be increased. Close black lens bracket. He didn't care about how much divine power he still had and just used all the holy spells he could. Open black lens bracket Sven Parav cast Immortal Flames. Close black lens bracket. He used the flames inside the temple without caring either. Since the sacred magic spell in the temple only protected against external flames, it was vulnerable to internal flames. Ah, well, a paladin shouldn't use that specific skill. I am no longer a paladin. But that wasn't something that could stop him, not anymore. Ack, that bastard. He could use techniques that were forbidden. You bit my ear. He suddenly had a thought. When he first entered the labyrinth, a goblin bit his neck like this. Damn, that's salty. How could they bite like it was no big deal? Ah, to survive, just like him. Pitui. As he continued this brutal fight to the death, he wondered, what was the difference between him and a goblin? Goblins were mostly killed by beginner adventurers who stepped into the labyrinth for the first time, and also the monsters that killed the most adventurers in return. A 9th-level humanoid monster. Goblins walked on 2 feet. Goblins used tools. Goblins struggled to survive. Goblins acted on instinct. And, I think this one is different. When goblins were in danger, they would abandon their allies and flee. At some point, the interior of the temple had become covered in pale flames. Parav was hit on the head with a bat which he failed to block and fell to the ground. He then took another blow while lying helplessly. You persistent bastard. The moment he was hit, his brain went cloudy. I will kill properly. The sounds began to cut out. The end. This was the end for him. As his enemy's legs surrounded him, he saw the half-destroyed statue of the goddess through the flames. Suddenly, he became curious. Where would your soul go? Would she go to Earth or to the afterlife that Raftania mentioned? If she returned to Earth, would she go to hell? Or would she be reincarnated as the Buddhists said? What would take your unbelieving soul? Ba-dum. His dying heart contracted. Rightwards arrow loop, I will give you strength. Leftwards arrow loop. What the hell is this now? It took him a moment to realize, but everything around him had stopped. It was different from when time flowed slowly, as if in extreme focus. The burning flames no longer danced, the ash floating in the air froze, and even the nameless vagabonds hammering his head became still. Rightwards arrow loop, I will grant you the power to destroy those who have wronged you, so that you can achieve whatever you want. Leftwards arrow loop. He felt it instinctively. Although he didn't know who was talking to him, if he accepted the offer, he would truly receive that power. But I would become a monster. The one speaking to him was an evil entity. A good entity would not have told him to abandon his allies and become the sole survivor. That entity also did not refute his words. It only asked him this question in return. Rightwards arrow loop, how laughable. What is a monster? Leftwards arrow loop. Rightwards arrow loop, if killing another person makes you a monster, then this world is already full of them. Leftwards arrow loop. That made sense. Rightwards arrow loop, listen to me. You are too weak to be called a monster, and too evil to be called human. Leftwards arrow loop. That voice had power. Rightwards arrow loop, listen to me. You who want to move forward in your own power, but also want someone to guide you. Leftwards arrow loop. Parav couldn't help but smile at what he heard next. Rightwards arrow loop, I will guide you. Leftwards arrow loop. No matter what power that voice possessed, it no longer had any persuasion. It was very simple. Rightwards arrow loop, I will show you the true path you must follow. Leftwards arrow loop. Because he recognized who that voice belonged to. For war. The ancient evil god did not deny. Rightwards arrow loop, grab my hand. Leftwards arrow loop. Another deep rumble echoed in his mind, and Parav responded in his heart. No, because it was a shorter refusal than any other, it better reflected his will. Rightwards arrow loop, the only way for you to survive is to become my servant. Leftwards arrow loop. Sure. Realistically, that would probably give you the best chance of success. Rightwards arrow loop, but why? Leftwards arrow loop. The reason was also very simple this time. Because I just had a feeling. The feeling that he wouldn't die even if he rejected this offer. Ba-dum. A strong sense of this blossomed in his heart. However, it was not an intuition given by someone else. Just as ordinary people's intuition is based on the unconscious condensation of their experiences and memories, his was also the same. If you listened carefully to what your enemies said and did the exact opposite, it would get you very far. That was what his clan leader had told him in the past, as they shared a drink. An ancient evil god who would only bring calamity and misfortune if I followed him, or a city hero who still tries to achieve mythical feats to this very moment while watching over his allies. It was obvious which of these two he should listen to. Just get out of here. Get out of my life, Parav declared, and the ancient evil god remained silent. He did not know how much time had passed, because everything was still, but the silence did not last long. Above the still world, as if breaking layers and layers of glass, a crack in the world appeared. A warm ray of silver light seeped in. Open black lens bracket. The intense light of the rising twilight shines upon you. Close black lens bracket. The starlight covered his entire body so warmly. Parav had known then. Open black lens bracket. The mark of the evil god on the character's soul has been cleansed. Close black lens bracket. That existence was no longer there. Just as he realized this, the voice of kindness, which contrasted with Karui's voice, echoed. May this be of help to those who wish to walk the path of my night. He had heard this voice once before, in a dream. The moment this voice resounded in his head, his body, which had barely responded, began to overflow with energy. Open black lens bracket. The body is being rapidly regenerated by the effects of recovery. Extreme level. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The character has obtained new authority. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Can now cast the Tier 0 holy spell Star Agent. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The character's body has been temporarily imbued with the direct authority of a god. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Divine power attribute has been permanently increased by +500. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The character has permanently obtained the perfection bonus. Close black lens bracket. He wasn't sure, but it felt like he had just gotten a lot stronger. Whatever. Let's just dodge that first. Time began to flow again. Parav rolled to the side to dodge the blunt weapon that was being aimed at his head. What? How? What was that light? As the prey they thought was already dead stood up as if nothing had happened, the Noarchians gaped in surprise. Parav gave them a relaxed smile. I think it was worth living a good life. Paladins and priests earned feats to receive holy spells from their gods. Because of this, some people could use these spells like wizards did, while others never experienced a situation where they could even use them. Anyway, that wasn't important. A new holy spell. Paladins and priests who received holy spells naturally knew what they were. Even the name of the authority. Agent of the Stars. What spell would that be? He had never heard of it before. Since the goddess even spoke to him while giving it to him, it was probably something quite powerful, so Parav could laugh even in the face of all these enemies. PFF'd. Most of his enemies looked at him as if he had lost his mind, and some of the more perceptive ones noticed that something had changed. They are smarter than the rest. He gave a sideways smile. But you will pay for your crimes. With that, Parav cast the holy spell. Since it was a new spell that he had never used before, he also memorized the command right there. May the blessing of the Twilight Star be with me, Agent of the Stars. The moment he activated the authority with determination, his body began to shine with an intense silver light. That brilliant and sacred light caused the Noarchian force to retreat in fear. Also, nothing happened. The bright light dimmed back down, and the enemies were still standing. He also didn't feel like he had gotten stronger. What just happened? Open black lens bracket. The activation condition was not met. The 0-level holy spell Star Agent failed to activate. Close black lens bracket. There was no way of knowing. He could only be sure of one thing. I'm done. The only advantage seemed to be that his enemies were also confused. Even though he was sweating a few drops of nervousness, Parav remained focused. Then he gave an embarrassed laugh as he raised his sword high. Ha ha ha, you evil beings, listen to me, I will show you mercy and let you go just this once. So, get out of here quickly. Despite speaking with all the authority he could, The enemy's expressions were 0% terror and 100% confusion. Could it be because I stuttered in that last sentence? He regretted his mistake, but it was too late. His enemies had already drawn their conclusions. I think something went wrong. I was surprised for nothing. I thought it would be something great. I don't know how he recovered, but he's still just a guy. Kill him again. They advanced on him once more. What do I do now? Could I escape if I tried? Coldly speaking, it seemed impossible. Using the first floor exit would only make him face more enemies, and there were too many enemies to get past if he wanted to jump out the second floor window. Method. Would he really die after receiving a gift from the goddess? If that was going to happen anyway, she should have let him die a heroic death. Boom. An explosion shattered the statue of the goddess, shattering it and cutting off her barrage of complaints as the path to the underground opened. Grah. Something gigantic jumped out from within and landed beside him with a roar. Boom. What is this? It seems like he was trying to help you. A Tyrian bear riding a giant bear. Parav lost focus for a moment in surprise. The bear riding Tyrian's ears pricked up. I heard my wife owes you a debt. I'm here to save you. Oh, don't be shy. Even if you didn't save my wife, an ally of Yandel is an ally of mine. He still couldn't understand what the Therian meant by that, but one thing was certain. Here, let's go. I'll lead the way. He survived. Open black lens bracket Abman Uric has released enhancement. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The effect of the next active skill used will be amplified proportionally to the soul power. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket Abman Uric has cast Pierce. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The piercing power of the next attack will be increased by ×10. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket Abman Uric cast Giant Arrow. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The size of the next long-range projectile will be amplified. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket Iron Bear Iridon has cast Fire Bear Stance. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. All attacks will receive a knockback bonus. High level. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket Abman Uric has released Master of the Jungle. Iron Bear Iridon's attributes have been greatly increased in close black lens bracket. He didn't talk to himself. Most of his internal dialogues were depressing, and saying these things out loud wouldn't change reality. No, that would only make him a more depressed and melancholic person. That was why he never talked to himself. At least, that was until now. I'm going crazy. For the first time in a long time, he muttered to himself. In front of him was a man who was holding on to his life, even as he vomited gallons of blood. Please, I want you to get up now, but strictly speaking, the possibility of that is low. Even knowing that, I have these harsh thoughts. I thought there would be more stories, but it seems that's not the case anymore. What a fickle thing fate is, I don't know why, but whenever I'm with you, I feel like such a bad person. He apologized to the man on the ground. Sorry, I really am different from you. I know you wouldn't even have thought of something like that, but I still can't make a decision. However, the man closed his eyes silently before opening them again. It still needs to be done. Even though he knew the man couldn't hear him, he continued to speak. Now, go. He felt as if he didn't, he would become weak again. He thought that his determination would not waver until the last moment, and this needed to be true for him to be sure of his convictions. It feels nostalgic to create another path for you again, but I guess it's expected. After all, I'm your scout. Even though he knew what the right path was, he couldn't take another path. May the blessing of the Twilight Star be with us. With that, Rodmiller solidified his determination.